Hello everybody, welcome back to It's Current Year. As I record this, we have 7 hours. 7 hours until we can play Total War Warhammer 3. Yeah, baby! That's what I'm talking about! My PP is exceptionally firm and I know yours is too. So I thought today to this isn't really Total War Warhammer 2 content, but the last piece of content that I would upload prior to jumping into Game 3, because I'm obviously not one of the cool kids, I haven't had early access, would be my first foray, my first dabbling into what I believe is one of the laziest genres of content. Somewhere between reaction video and apology video, we have a tier list. That's right, I'm going to do a tier list for Total War Warhammer 3, but it's going to have a bit of a spin on it, you see. I have no idea how these things are going to play. I'm not going to be one of those people who's going to make my mind up too much on what we've seen so far from the early access from the content creators. No, today's tier list is all going to be about hype. My own personal hype, which means you can argue in the comments all you like, but you're still wrong, because this is my opinion, and as everyone knows, opinions are always correct. Everyone can have their own opinion and you're always right when you do that. So, jumping into our tier list, we're just gonna, this is not scripted, this is just stream of consciousness, so it's gonna be just fantastic content. We'll jump in with our first hype faction, the one we saw all the way, feels like a year ago, probably is about a year ago, in the trailer, and that is Kislev. So Kislev is a bit of an outlier for myself because throughout my time playing Warhammer, I've never been that interested by human factions. On the tabletop, I played High Elves, Dark Elves, Lizardmen, and Warriors of Chaos. Now, there are human elements within the Warriors of Chaos, Marauders, that's about it. Everything else is, rather inhuman or strictly inhuman. But, Empire, Britannia, these kinds of factions never really captured my imagination, and Kislev, initially when I first saw them, as great as that first trailer was, kind of fell into that category as well. But in the last couple of weeks, as I said, this has become a bit of an outlier for me. I'm actually really excited to play Kislev, because it's something new in that it is a faction with a heavy hybrid infantry theme. And I think given the new game mode, I think that's going to be quite a strong way to build armies. We've seen with some of the other factions as well, the units that can fight, capture flag points, but also shoot are pretty effective in this game mode. So I'm quite interested to see how Kislev play, and I think they have a chance of being one of my main factions. I'm slotting them straight into A tier. Now, obviously Domination mode is going to be the main competitive and online form of play, but in land battles I think Kislev might struggle for the exact reason that I think that they'll be decent in Domination mode. Hybrid infantry in land battles traditionally has been something that is a very min-maxed unit type. You take a couple to fulfill a certain purpose, or you really don't take them at all. So, I feel like with limited options outside of their hybrids, that they are going to pay a bit of a premium for that, and when the emphasis is on accruing value by damaging other units, hybrid infantry doesn't exactly excel at that, but we won't read too far into it. Kislev gets a big thumbs up for me. I'm pretty excited to play some Kislev and get frosty with the Kislevites. We'll jump into Corden, because obviously we saw them in the initial trailer as well, and we've seen a lot of them in the early access so far. Now, Corden has always held a pretty soft spot in my heart. My Warriors of Chaos army, which I mentioned before, was Corden themed. Lots of red, lots of gold, and I've always enjoyed their aesthetic. Corden has always been, to some people, the least interesting of the Chaos Gods, because it's just about running forward and killing people. But he's more complex than that. We won't do a deep dive into the lore today, but having seen the way they play in the Domination mode, I think they're going to be a very, very strong faction. They were always going to be a faction that I probably leaned towards, just because of my own, personal experiences with tabletop Warhammer for the last 22 years. So Corden are going straight into A tier. Like I said, I think they're going to be a strong Domination faction because they are mobile, they have strong infantry, and they have strong mobile elements like Fleshhounds, which we've seen, but I think they'll hold their own in land battles too, and obviously these initial factions will be filled out via DLCs and updates. I'd say they'll get priority with the DLC schedule. So Corden are going straight into A tier. Jumping in now to a faction that I am surprised how non-fussed I am about, and that's the Ogre Kingdoms. Now, I always kind of like the Ogre Kingdoms from a tabletop perspective because they were very unique, and I felt like that stands up in Total War as well. But for some reason, I just haven't really been wowed by them. I think they are going to be a strong faction. I originally figured, as I think most people, or many people might have, that Monstrous Infantry maybe wasn't going to be able to cap objectives well, and they were going to struggle in domination mode. I do think that they will struggle long term in land battles, but in domination mode, the fact that all their Monstrous Infantry counts as infantry for capping status has made me rethink that very, very strongly. I think they're going to be a very strong faction. There's clearly some very, very strong combinations. The Iron Blaster is ridiculous. Scrag and Gorges, I think, are going to be... they're only going to last one update pack before they get a fairly significant nerf. But the Ogres, they're a hard C, but they're still a C. They're just not quite doing it for me. I will probably play them because, like I said, they're a faction that should appeal to me. I love monstrous units, and I love factions that build in different ways. It's one of the reasons why I used to love playing vampire counts, and let's not talk about them. So C tier for Ogres. Up next, Nurgle. Now, I think Nurgle has been maybe a little bit unfairly. I have my own theories about Nurgle, but I think some people are writing Nurgle off a little bit too early. They obviously are a fairly one-dimensional faction that don't have a lot of shooting options. They're not very mobile. I think there's going to be a very distinct way to play Nurgle in domination mode, and that is to basically consolidate all your efforts on 2 capture points and play the long game. Obviously, they still have a number of strong units. I think the Nurgle Cultist looks like a very strong choice. I think that'll be universally quite a good pick, particularly with the current mechanism where you can recall your units and then refresh their abilities. It's basically a cheap unit of Plague Bearers, which obviously won't cap, but will sit on a cap and perhaps help you hold it for longer. And obviously, with a bit of a lack of armor piercing, the armor debuff effect through armor sundering might be big. Kugath is one as well that I think people in the last sort of week are sort of coming around to. Initially wasn't seen as a very strong pick. But yeah, I think Nurgle is going to be stronger than people think. The massive HP pools and the massive access to healing is going to make them, very, very, very playable, provided you play in a certain manner. I'm moderately excited for Nurgle, but they probably just... they don't really play in the manner that I like to play the game. So up next, we have the faction which I am the least hyped for. And I don't know why I'm the least hyped for it, because it's a totally new faction. And that is Cathay. And I am so unhyped for Cathay that we are going to have to add a few tiers to our tier list. So you'll see now that there is an E tier and an F tier. Now you'd be thinking to yourself, well, that's a tell, Cathay's going to go in F, but what if I told you were wrong? What if I told you that there is another tier that we are going to be exploring for the purposes of today's video? A tier even below F tier, which summarizes my hype about Cathay. What's worse than F tier? Well, James Corden is worse than F tier, and Cathay are going into F tier. I have no interest in this faction, and I can't work. Well, I have a theory why, but Cathay. It's strange to me because Cathay have occupied this place within the Warhammer sort of universe for the longest time, almost this mythical status where we've never actually seen them realized on the tabletop or in any model form. But we get nice little snippets of them here and there throughout army books, throughout rule books. There are a lot of nods to Cathay. There are a lot of mentions of Cathay, but they've never actually been a faction for all intents and purposes. So when they were first announced, and I think most of the community thought that they were a pretty good chance to be explored, I was excited to see what CA had come up with. And I do enjoy the aesthetic, and I do enjoy certainly what they've done visually with their campaign map, like the terrain and all that sort of stuff. But in terms of their gameplay, I could not be less interested to play Cathay. Maybe you might say it's because then they haven't really been shown off as one of the stronger factions at the moment, but I've never really had a tendency to bandwagon onto factions simply because they were strong. I played what I liked, and I'm just struggling to like Cathay. They feel like if the Empire and the High Elves had a kid, but they didn't love it, and it grew up to just be this horrible child that was just always doing the wrong thing. And I mentioned before that I have a theory. Well, High Elves being one of my main factions, I think I have developed an aversion to crap faction mechanics, and Harmony to me seems like a crap faction mechanic that, unfortunately, similar to Martial Prowess with the High Elves, Cathay pays through the nose for. And Domination Mode is not a game format where it's easy to maintain Harmony, from what I see so far. They aren't overall a very high leadership faction, so they, I think, might struggle to grind it out on capture points where their shooting units can be strong. I think they have some strong units. I think I like what they've done with the dragon characters. I like what they have done. The Longbow Riders look cool. I like the look of the Jade Warriors and the Celestial Dragon Guard, but overall there's just something missing, and I just can't get interested as much as anyone else. It's like James Corden. People keep telling you that they're good, but normal people just struggle to see it. Cathay are in the James Corden tier. Moving on now, we have two factions left, Tzeentch and Slaanesh. Slaanesh is going straight into S tier, boy, and anyone who knows me knows that I am a complete and utter degenerate. As a Dark Elf main, that could be, it's to be expected. But from day dot, I've been really excited to see how Slaanesh played, and I think they have absolutely. I think, in fairness, they've done a great job nailing the ethos of all the monogod factions and what they do well and where they're limited. Slaanesh is really up my alley as well in terms of playstyle. I like using mobile troop types. I'm used to playing with factions that aren't necessarily good at taking damage, but they're good at dealing damage. So I think in that sense, Slaanesh appeals to me. But as I said, this is hype. This is all about hype. Slaanesh aesthetic of that just fully naughty. I just love it. I love it. So I've always had a soft spot for Slaanesh. Outside of Khorne, whose color scheme and just look on the tabletop has always captured my eye. Slaanesh has always been my favorite Chaos God, and I am very, very excited that they are shaping up as a pretty strong faction. I think they're probably similar to Khorne. I think they are one faction that looks like they are going to translate well to Domination Mode and eventually in the long term to land battles. Very high skill cap. Not easy to play well, but if you can get the hang of them, I think they're going to be a very rewarding faction. S for Slaanesh, baby, they're going straight to the top, which leaves us with Tzeentch. Now, Tzeentch's color scheme has always, that brilliant sort of neon flowing color scheme has always looked the best on the tabletop, and it's incredibly fun to paint from a hobby perspective because you can make your models look like a toddler's coloring book, and you can be just like, hey, it's Tzeentch, man. He doesn't know what's going on. But Tzeentch gameplay looks a little bit, I don't know. I mentioned before with Kislev that I was excited about hybrid infantry, but Tzeentch's game style didn't grab me as much as I thought it will. Now, I think, like most people, that Tzeentch will be a strong faction. So there'll probably be a faction that I do use, because all the 4 Chaos Gods, I mean, I'm, as I said earlier in the video, very, very much into Chaos, and the most exciting element of Warhammer 3 for me was the introduction of new Chaos units, particularly the Demons, but also the Monogod Mortal units, which we never really saw in Warriors of Chaos. So Tzeentch naturally gets a bit of an up on that. So here is my completed tier list, all the way from Slaanesh in S tier down to Cathay in James Corden. Feel free to tell me about why I am wrong in the comments below, and I should be excited about other things. We're going to go headlong into Total War Warhammer 3 once it drops. It's obviously breathed new life into this community, and I'm really, really excited. I'm actually excited to play a campaign again, which is the first time in probably 2.5 years. But to wrap up, in wrapping up, get excited. I'm really looking forward to it. I'm hoping to be able to stream a little bit more in the coming days. And remember, James Corden's fucking shit.
Brothers and sisters, rejoice. Pleasure beyond imagining awaits you.